Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we love talking about music and movie making, which in this case, they're both combined. So we're honored to be joined by Joshua Cannon and Barrett Kutas. They're both directors with Studio 143, and we're going to talk about how that ties in with Colour Revolt as well. So how are you two guys doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing well. This is a fun conversation because we get to talk about movies and music and documentaries and storytelling, defining success. So before we dive into the story and the documentary you all are working on, though, give us a little bit of background for you two in terms of filmmakers, musicians yourself. Give us a little bit of background.
Barrett and I grew up together. So we both kind of played music in high school, playing in different bands. And naturally, when you do that, there's a lot of overlap. So we spent a lot of time hanging out, playing shows in our buddy's living room, community centers, doing that. And eventually that graduated to us, playing in the same band together and doing a lot of the kind of DIY touring thing where we were, calling venues, asking anyone to let us play who would, and driving as far as we could, sleeping on floors and being really grateful just to kind of see the country and meet people and play music. And so, we did that for as feel like the bulk of being a teenager and going into our 20s. And somewhere in there, movies had always been a huge passion of ours and something we were kind of just obsessive over. And we just, I think there was a specific at a Waffle House near our parents' house where we would go and daydream all the time about the stories we wanted to tell and the films that we wanted to make. And even like really early on, one of them was like, yo, one day, if not us, who needs to make a documentary about Colour Revolt? It just needs to happen. And so, yeah, I mean, from being like 18 to now, it was always that kind of like great white whale thing that we wanted to do.
So as filmmakers and obviously as musicians and being influenced by Colour Revolt, Barrett, on your end, how do you describe Colour Revolt? Because for those who don't know the band, I would say indie rock, alternative rock, ahead of their time. So how would you describe Colour Revolt?
I mean, that's pretty accurate. They're indie rock. They have soft parts. They have loud parts. Someone's described them as loud, quiet, loud music. But it has a real like Southern flair to it. Not a Southern rock band, but where you really understand like this band is not from LA. They're not from New York, but they hit with those sort of bands from that area, like the early 2000s.
And for them, Oxford, Mississippi. And so when you talk about kind of the regional piece of this, high exposure, played a lot of shows, influenced a lot of bands. And even on my end, from West Coast and East Coast and everything in between, you hear so many bands that were influenced by Colour Revolt. And, we were talking before we hit record on this, how now you can really hear their music in terms of what you would be playing on the radio, because in that era, when they came up, early 2000s, 2010, 2008, 9, 10, that era, you were hearing a lot of rock pop. And so now it's more of the rock storytelling. And so I think all of that will play into this conversation we're going to have in just a second in terms of what does success look like? What is success? How does that play out? But carry that forward, Joshua, on your end in terms of when you look at the story of Colour Revolt, talk about how that starts to play into this documentary and the story that you're telling through this documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of to what Barrett said a minute ago, because they were from Mississippi and because they weren't from Los Angeles or New York, or a little bit further, like we were the really fortunate community who got to see Colour Revolt. And sometimes that was venue. Sometimes that was at a random backyard somewhere. Sometimes that was like in the upper floor of a business that was like nondescript and you didn't know where you were going into. Like sometimes they were the supporting act for a much larger band, and sometimes they were headlining on their own shows. And so you really there was this community that built around who they were, and they were the band where you would maybe be going to see another show. And I know that's how it was for us. We were going to see another show, and I can't remember the headliner. But Colour Revolt came on as the supporting band, and it just, it blew our doors off, and it was incredibly formative. And they became a band that, like, still to this day, there's some music that I listened to when I was in my early 20s or a teenager, like really nostalgic for me. But I feel like the difference in what makes Colour Revolt so special is that as I get older, their music evolves with me, and they still feel so relevant to my life. And obviously to other musicians too. Like, they still, like, we've gotten the chance to talk with so many musicians who are like, when we're still writing songs to this day and we're just demoing them and we have riffs, this track 8 will become Colour Revolt chorus, or the bridge that's like Colour Revolt, like, so their splash might not have been ginormous in terms of everyone in the world knowing who Colour Revolt is, but they very much rippled out and became like, if you had a favorite band, it was very likely that their favorite band was Colour Revolt during that time.
Yeah, and you hear that a lot with a lot of the mainstream bands. Their influences were ones that you've never heard of, and it's because they have soul and creativity and stuff that you don't find everywhere. And so, and I still remember The Cradle in terms of the album. The difference on this is that you're kind of seeing where are they now. And so talk about kind of what the documentary focuses on in terms of sharing the story, not just of them before, but really where are they now, because they just kind of softly broke up.
Right. Yeah, I feel like Colour Revolt as a band is just an entry point for maybe like a more universal conversation about what the story is about. I say story, but I just mean stepping into these people's lives who committed so much of their time and passion to being in that band and seeing they are now. And I think that if there's any through line for the film, it's not so much about why isn't this band the band that made it and got so big. It's more about how do you respond to life when it doesn't pan out the way you thought it might, especially when you're in adolescence, right? And so, like you said, when they broke up, I think it was in 2012, but when they disbanded, they kind of did so really quietly and without a word to their fans, excuse me. But yeah, so now, they've evolved into so many different roles. One of the members has gone on to become a social worker. One of them does missionary work. One of them, who exclusively pretty much played drums their whole life, kind of fell out of their relationship with music and still played and toured with other bands. But Colour Revolt was the band they were in from the time that they were in middle school up until the point where they weren't anymore, and they picked up painting. And they're just an incredible artist. And it's this gift that, like, I think of it as, well, everyone agrees this way. Like, I think of it as like we're all opened up to like a frequency, right? And like we're able to receive that. And obviously that was something waiting to be received. And like, he's incredible, and he teaches and he paints. So yeah, they've all gone on to kind of like pursue the best versions of themselves in other roles. It's really cool to be a fly on the wall and get to talk with them and experience what that looks like. And that, sorry to be long-winded, but I think just because something lasts forever doesn't mean that it doesn't have meaning, right? Like, it's obviously still very significant.
I want to get your thoughts, Barrett, too, because I look at it as, from a music industry perspective, there's the business side of it in terms of, okay, the deals, fighting for the label, the marketing, the pop, the radio play, like there's that sort of piece to it. And then there's which I think everyone can relate to. You put your heart and soul as an athlete, as an artist, as a business person, as an entrepreneur into something, and you are working so hard to try to build something amazing. And, all of a sudden, for some reason, as an athlete, maybe you hurt your shoulder or you tear your knee. So all this effort you put in, and you kind of have to pivot, right, with your life. And that's soul searching. That's difficult. That's ego. Those are conversations. But I think ultimately it's like, how do I take those moments and appreciate them for what they were as powerful lessons and stories that ultimately change your life, that you can then apply in all these other new ways to redefine success and meaning in your own life. And it's not, you have to be the rock star. It's, hey, you had an amazing experience that leads you now into fulfillment with your family and social work and painting and creativity. So I think kind of back to redefining success, that conversation, not just about the business, but about the soul and the ego and how all these things collide. I think that's a really powerful part of this. So Barrett, what would you add?
I mean, all of that is fantastically put. I mean, it's what Josh said a little bit earlier, it's finding importance in things that are not permanent, and they spent their whole lives, their whole adolescence, and then their young adult lives, and saw that their friends that they were going to college with, were starting families or doing this or that, and they spent all this time and energy and passion and put it all into one thing. And that's really the question, that I am so excited about asking all of them, and just seeing their reactions to all this, and how now, where do you place all that energy and passion? And, they're putting it all back into not only fulfillment for themselves, but, helping others. And, it's really great stuff. Yeah.
I think for musicians too, you go in wanting to make a difference. Like there's a piece of this from the emotional side. You want to connect, you want to be able to inspire, but ultimately, like, you want to move people. And whether that's, on the inspirational or on more of the kind of the sad side, like evoking emotion on something that you're going through. And I think those are things that you carry forward, that, to your point, you realize storytelling and all these, just from an emotional standpoint, like you can carry that forward in really powerful ways, in new ways, not just through music. And so I like using Colour Revolt as a lens to have deeper conversations around things that are really important in society. And I think that's, to me, kind of what this plays out. Talk about the opportunity for people to be a part of this. You have kind of a really cool nonprofit angle, if you will, in terms of partnering up, where people can help you create this documentary.
Yeah, 100%. So we're super grateful. We were accepted by this organization named the Gotham Film and Media Institute for a fiscal sponsorship, which essentially means that we, through the Gotham, can take tax-deductible charitable donations, which is something that we would never be able to provide otherwise. So what's so wonderful, and we feel really blessed over, is the fact that they believe so much in the project that they are willing to support us in that way. But traditionally, before that, we're going to people to make this movie, and traditional investments are what exists in film. People are wanting to make an investment, and that's just a totally different mechanism for getting involved. Whereas this, someone can come in, be involved, support it, and know that they can do that with a little less pressure, And I one thing that I love so much the way that it played out is, I think it goes along with the nature of what this film is, and what this story is, because it is about a band. What's underneath that? What's the story underneath the way this showed up in their lives, And so in a lot of ways, I'm really fortunate to be able to make the movie in this way. And I hope that once it's done, to be able to share it, we can share it as widely as we can, as accessibly as we can, invite people in that, because I really do think that there is a universal element to this. For anyone who's ever been in that position where they've been looking at the intersection where you have a dream or a passion, you're following it, but you're also trying to build a sustainable life. And what do those look like? And, what does it look like to be 18, to be playing these shows and opening up to these bands, and to be playing these large venues and feeling like that might be your life forever? And then that doesn't pan out. But then when you get a little older, you have a child, and you see that child for the first time, and you're taking on this new role. And it's this beautiful, blessed thing that you're able to step into, and what does that fulfillment look like? And it's one of the other isn't more significant. They hang in balance and they inform each other, it's the evolution of what it means to live a life, and I think that's awesome. And that's missing a lot from conversations we have about what it means to like be an art, be a successful artist, or like if you're not monetizing your art and you're not growing this every year, like you're not, and you know, that's just like, that's not true. You know, that's not true. And they're to me like one of the greatest testaments to that we are close to, because in a lot of ways they feel very close to home with where they're from.
Yeah, I like how you're putting it too, of your values change, especially with different, ages, and your priorities, your values change. And it doesn't mean that what you valued before is not significant and didn't lead you to these new opportunities. It's appreciation with all these different phases, but you can value and change and grow and mature and find success at each different stage. And I think there's a cool piece of it too. And I like the fact that each one of them has carved their own path to find fulfillment in very different ways, which is a really cool element. So once again, back to the lens of using Colour Revolt as the lens, really, really cool angle. And obviously for anyone who's a fan of the band, influenced by the band, an art, who just is an artist who wants to support the creative arts, movie making, all of this storytelling, and like we're talking about these deeper discussions, really easy way to get involved. So wrap up on your end with where to go. So where do we go to learn more about the project? Where do we go to actually make the donations?
important. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll preface that by saying that, $20, $10, $5, like whatever you have significantly helps to get this story told and this movie made. And so there's no barrier to anything you contribute, and we're really appreciative. But if you go to the Gotham's fiscal sponsorship website, you can search our project by typing in Colour Revolt. It's currently listed as Brought to Life, a documentary about Colour Revolt. And then once you're there, it's as easy as there's a link that says make a contribution. It's tax deductible. You click on that link, you put in your credit card information, and it goes directly into our account with the nonprofit. And then after you do that, you get a letter in the mail, and you get a letter in your email that for your tax records that shows the contribution you've made. And you can make one-time contribution, you can make regular contributions. So you can be as involved as you'd like. And to that point, I'd say that, we are planning down the road for those that do contribute. We're taking a record so that once the film is done, we're able to invite them to our first screening, share early cuts with them, keep them informed about where we are in this process of making the movie. And so, yeah, I think it's, if you want to support, man, we'd be so grateful for that. But one thing that you decide to support it is a regular conversation about where we are with the film. And I do think, like, not to use this word cheaply, but it's an inspiring process to participate in and to be involved in watching the story be told and kind of have the updates as they come in from different people that we're filming with or visiting with.
Absolutely. For you all, easy way to connect in. And for obviously anybody who says, hey, I want to learn more and get involved, you can also direct them just by reaching out. So email is Joshua, Joshua @143 spelled out. So 143.co. So that's an easy email, or you can reach out to Barrett, BARRETT @143.co. So if you just email them, they'll connect you in. So that makes it easy. Greatly appreciate all you all are doing, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much
for having us.
Thank you.